It's no secret that from Resident Evil 4 to Resident Evil 6, the series seemed to have lost its way. And however you feel about those entries is really irrelevant to that point. I don't consider myself a purist by any means, but the shift from survival horror to straight action did very little for me as well as many of the fanbase. And despite Resident Evil 5 and 6 being some of Capcom's best-selling games, the Resident Evil community was at a divide. This shift led to a massive split that is now a way to determine when a person became a fan and played their first Resident Evil game. So when Resident Evil 7 was announced, I understood everyone's skepticism with the announcement of a new Resident Evil game with a new protagonist and a new setting seemingly disconnected from the main story.
Resident Evil Retrospective.
As the marketing for Resident Evil 7 released, I could feel my excitement for the game, but I seemed to be cautious. After all, I had been burned before by Capcom and Resident Evil 6 when they stated they were going back to horror. But before we go and talk about the game, we have to go back and talk about a demo called PT. PT was a playable teaser that was eventually discovered to be a demo teaser for a new Silent Hill game. A cancelled Silent Hill game. This demo sparked the imagination in the horror community that had seemed to lay dormant for a while. PT delivered the type of horror that we had been waiting for. It made us afraid of the unknown, and it is still regarded as one of the best horror games to date. The success of PT had helped lead to the success of Resident Evil 7, as many who played PT wanted more. Despite this, Resident Evil 7 was not a PT clone as many believed it to be, nor did the staff of PT work on the game as rumors went on. In fact, the game was being developed at the same time as PT, but it just so happened that PT would release first. The development and marketing of Resident Evil 7 is probably one of my favorite out of all the Resident Evil games. Instead of a traditional announcement or demo, they did something that no one had noticed until much later. Development began around early 2014, and Capcom decided they wanted to scale the game back from the big action set pieces from Resident Evil 4 through 6. They wanted to get players back to survival horror and get immersed in the game and to be as scary as possible. Taking inspiration from films such as Evil Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they accomplished just that. For this new entry in the series, they decided they wanted to go with a different engine. Instead of the MT framework they had been using in their games for many years prior. Thus, the RE engine was born. The RE engine is one of the best things Capcom has done. Using new graphical and rendering techniques, this engine could produce highly realistic human skin, dynamic shadows, and the ability to output to 4K resolution, HDR, and VR modes. This new engine also allowed developers to create photorealistic rendering. This was achieved by having the character's clothing or any object scanned via a 3D photo shoot. This engine would go on to be used in Capcom's other games, such as Devil May Cry 5, Monster Hunter Rise, Resident Evil 2 Remake, and much more. RE7 would have a lot of callbacks to other Resident Evil games. The first of which was the decision to make the game be in first person. This idea was something they wanted to implement into the first Resident Evil, but couldn't due to the limitations of the PS1. With the shift to first person made, they then hired a second development team to work on having the game play in VR. This would be a blessing in disguise, however, as this now forced the team to make textures much more detailed. And now, with all that in place, it's time to get to the marketing. The first piece of marketing was cleverly hidden behind a VR tech demo called Kitchen. In this demo, you assume the role of Clancy Jarvis. He is tied up in a chair, and he wakes up in a kitchen. Laying on the ground before him is his co-worker, Peter Walken. When Peter comes to, he attempts to free Clancy, but is stabbed by a possessed woman. This demo captivated everyone who saw it. It was terrifying. And what no one knew at the time was that this demo was being used to test the reaction for what would become Resident Evil 7. For within the Kitchen title, Capcom hid the number 7 in the T for Kitchen. This demo would be the first stepping stone to the fascination that would soon follow. 1 year later, it was officially announced that a new Resident Evil game was in the works. And in October 2016, Capcom released a 10-part video series titled The World of Resident Evil 7, which teased concepts for the game. Shortly after the announcement for the game, a playable demo was released on the PlayStation Store. This playable demo would give many the same feeling as the PT demo. The demo seemed to hold a lot of secrets as you explored a small dilapidated house to which you had to escape. In this demo, there were 3 different ways to change the different outcomes. In this small house, there were many things to discover, including a VCR tape which showed the 2 characters from the Kitchen demo. Throughout the demo, there were many other secrets to discover, such as a ghost girl, who would show up in various parts seemingly at random with no real way to trigger the event. Among the items in the demo, there was one item that stood out: the dummy finger. When the demo first released, everyone in the community treated it like PT. They would do everything they could to try and find out what the dummy finger would do, or they would explore every nook and cranny, chopping at everything with an axe. I'll admit, I was one of those players. I was extremely excited to jump back in and see what I could discover and see if I could find an explanation as to what the dummy finger did. But this was all in vain, as the dummy finger did nothing, at least for now. This demo had become highly successful and gave confidence to both Capcom and the community that they were on the right path. By July 2016, the demo was downloaded over 2 million times. It was at this point Capcom knew they had something that gave players something they longed for: mystery and intrigue, all wrapped up in a horror shell. And soon after, they updated the demo to keep continuing interest. The new demo was titled the Twilight version. Releasing on September 15, 2016, this demo brought players back to the same dilapidated house, but some things were now different. New rooms and items were found, and a new ending with an ambiguous phone call from a mysterious woman. Subtle changes were also made to the demo, including the photo above the fireplace, which once showed only Jack and Marguerite Baker. Now, it showed a family portrait of the couple with their children. Other cosmetic changes included a black mold substance in one of the halls and a door leading to the basement that now shakes as you approach it. The biggest change to this demo was a couple of new items and a new location in the attic. When going to the attic, one of the walls is knocked down, revealing a new room. Inside this room is a new key and handgun ammo, both items which had no use. In the bedroom, there is now a message on the wall that seems to be written in blood. And finally, this demo offered a new piece to a puzzle many players, myself included, had been trying to figure out for months. The dummy finger could now be combined with a new item to create a dummy hand. This new combination made the hand look as if it was pointing. And now we had a new mystery to solve, as this demo offered only more questions. These answers finally came with the final version of the demo. For half a year, Capcom had done an incredible job in keeping interest for Resident Evil 7. And 1 month before the release of the game, the Midnight demo released. With this demo, more locations were available to explore, as well as new items. Along with this, we now had our answer to the dummy finger. This demo now had a true ending, which was achieved by finding a black notebook and using the dummy hand to point at spots where people were murdered. Finding these murder locations would fill in the notebook with clever rhymes that reminded me of the Haunted Mansion at Disney World. And I don't say that sarcastically, because the Haunted Mansion is awesome. With the big questions from the demo now answered, we had even more questions for this game. Who were the bakers? What was this mold all over the house? Who was this mysterious woman that we called the Ghost Girl? And did this game tie into the previous games at all? Fortunately, we didn't have to wait long, because on January 24th, 2017, Resident Evil Biohazard would release. The release of Resident Evil 7 would mark the first time we would see both Resident Evil and Biohazard in the same title. It would also mark the first time the Biohazard name would be on the game in the US. Instead of being in a metropolitan area, the game would go back to its roots and pay homage to the original game. Our protagonist, Ethan Winters, would find himself at a plantation in Dulve, Louisiana, due to a message that he received from his wife, Mia, who was presumed dead in 2014. Making his way to an abandoned house, he begins his search. And I want to offer a warning here. If you have not yet played Resident Evil 7, be warned, there will be spoilers moving forward. Those who played the demo would instantly recognize this house, as it was the same location. As Ethan makes his way to the basement, he finds Mia locked up. And once again, people who were familiar with the kitchen demo would notice Mia was the killer in that demo. Confused as to why Ethan would be there, as she insisted that she did not send the tape to him.
Here.
What do you mean? You contacted me.
No, I wouldn't. Did I? Did anyone see you? Did he see you?
Hey, who else is here? What the hell's going on?
Daddy's coming. We need to go.
Daddy?
We need to go now!
Ethan quickly realizes that something is wrong with Mia, and not too long after, she turns violent, and her face looks like she is possessed. This leads to a fight to the death, with Ethan seemingly killing her with an axe to the neck.
You shouldn't have called me this! Now you have to be dead too.
Everything about this section of the game sets the stage for what was to come the further you got. This introduction was exciting and terrifying. It made me feel as I did when I first started playing Resident Evil for the very first time. I was tense. The frantic situation seeming to get worse and worse as it went on left me feeling helpless. Especially as Mia cut off Ethan's hand.
Now, let's see how you feel.
This section leads to a final confrontation with Ethan and Mia in the attic as Ethan finds a gun and Mia has a chainsaw. Defeating Mia leads to the introduction of Jack Baker as he welcomes Ethan to the family and knocks him out.
Welcome to the family, son.
Ethan wakes up at a dinner table, and it is here we are introduced to the Bakers: Jack, the grandma, Marguerite, and Lucas. This scene plays out in a very similar manner to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre dinner scene, to which, as I mentioned earlier, the game drew heavy inspiration from. Playing through this part of the game for the first time, I quickly recognized the inspiration the game drew from the very first Resident Evil. The main hall looked like a smaller version of the Spencer Mansion. Both had staircases leading to the second floor with a walkway stretched across, and both acted as a safe spot from all the craziness in the game. At least, that's what it makes you think. As in this area, Jack is able to follow you in what you think would be a safe zone. Resident Evil 7 even marked the return of puzzles, exploration, and more importantly, item scarcity. If it's your first time playing Resident Evil 7, you probably did not notice a lot of the nods to the overarching lore from prior games. And that's okay, because the best thing about this entry is that it stands alone as its own game. Something which a lot of Resident Evil fans actually complain about, but I think it's what makes the game a fresh starting point for newcomers. But that's not to say the game doesn't tie into the others. As you explore the Baker estate, you will come across news articles detailing the events of Resident Evil 6, news articles talking about the Raccoon City incident. You will find pictures of the Arclay Mountains, the setting for the first Resident Evil game. You will also find documents talking about how the Baker estate was designed by the architect Trevor, who designed the Spencer Mansion. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's continue with the story. As you escape from Jack, he pursues you throughout the house. You discover the house is overrun by this black mold. Eventually making your way to the basement reveals this game's common enemies, the molded. Now I'm going to take this moment to point out the weakest part of this game. The molded as enemies. Yes, the first time you encounter them, they are intimidating and scary, but the variety of enemies leaves much to be desired. You have the basic molded, then the basic ones with a giant claw. You have the four-legged molded, and then you have the fat molded. Aside from one section that has giant wasps, that's all the common enemies. The reason this is an issue is because even with the variations, they still look the same. Most Resident Evil games have had plenty of enemy variations and differences throughout the years. In the basement, past the boiler room, is the best this game has to offer. If you ask anyone what their favorite part of Resident Evil 7 was, they would all tell you the chainsaw boss battle with Jack. This battle is peak Resident Evil 7 right here. It's this moment that Ethan has had enough. Once he grabs that chainsaw to fight Jack, Ethan goes from a helpless victim to fighting in a caged death match, where once he emerges victorious, he is ready to make the Bakers his bitch. From this moment, the game takes a shift, as Ethan is now the ruler of the Baker estate, as he took down the person the others were seemingly afraid of. It is this moment where you are free to roam the estate without feeling threatened or being chased. But remember, I said the game pays homage to the original? And just like the original, there is a house outside that you must explore next. Being guided by Zoe, the daughter of the Bakers, over a phone call, you are now led to the old house, where Marguerite seems to have taken over. Zoe had told Ethan that he can make a cure to whatever is going on, and that the first piece of the cure is in the old house. So after dispatching Marguerite and her infestation, seriously, she has some serious issues in the downstairs department, we make our way to the first piece of the cure, an old arm. After retrieving it, however, we see for the first time a child.
Oh, God. I guess this is it.
And now the intrigue peaks again. It's this way of storytelling that really makes this game stand out. Now, out of the old house, we get another call, but we learn that Zoe has been kidnapped by her brother Lucas, who also has Mia. After taunting Ethan, we now begin the next section of the game.
This is gonna help me and me, right?
Hey, buddy. I thought you should know. I decided that Zoe needed a timeout. She and Mia are here with me. And they're keeping each other company.
Just let them both go. What do you need them for?
Nah, that's family business, Ethan, and not your concern. Understand? Now, if you want the head, feel free to come by any time and I'll give it to you. But only if you participate in a little activity I put together just for you.
What activity?
Oh, I know you're excited, but don't worry. It's not going anywhere. First step I need you to take.
This section also shows its influence from the movie Saw, as Lucas is constantly putting Ethan through games of survival.
You can, crawl around underneath that filthy, rotten house all you want looking for them ingredients, but you ain't gonna find a goddamn thing, Ethan. You'll make that serum? Ooh, baby. You're gonna have to come through me. You hear?
But using information found on a previous VHS tape, we can solve the puzzle quite easily. Lucas manages to escape, but leaves behind the last part of the cure for Ethan to make. All seemed well as Ethan now rescues Mia and Zoe. Before he could engage in a dream most men have, Jack breaks up the party in true boss badass fashion.
Zoe! Get your ass back to the house! I will deal with you later!
Now we must fight a fully mutated Jack. After this excruciating battle, Ethan is forced to use one of the cures on Jack, finally putting him out of his misery, at least until the end of Zoe DLC.
You want me to cure him?
Now Ethan must make the decision of saving his wife, who had lied to him and gone missing for 3 years, and who had tried to kill him a few times, or save his side piece Zoe, who had been loyal to him this whole time, trying to save them all. It's at this point we as a player have to decide. But there is only one canon ending, and that is to save Mia, with Ethan promising Zoe he will send help. Again, see End of Zoe DLC. Choosing Zoe will lead to her death anyways, along with Mia's death. So off the not so happy couple go, on a boat only to be flipped over by some weird tentacle stuff. Because let's be honest, it wouldn't be a Resident Evil game without some tentacles. Now, at this point, the game makes a shift once again. We now control Mia as she chases to find Ethan. Here, we are confronted by the little girl. She begins to taunt Mia as Mia enters a rusted ship.
Are you remembering?
What? What are you?
The girl leads Mia to a room on the ship where she was waiting with a VHS tape for Mia to watch. It is up until this point Mia had no recollection of the little girl or why they were on the ship. I also want to note that this tape is the only tape in the game that is mandatory to watch. It's through this tape and the rest of the game moving forward where it begins to tie into the Resident Evil series as a whole. At least, if you didn't see all the Easter eggs throughout the game. We learn that the little girl is named Evelyn, and she is a bioweapon created by a group known as the Connections. Mia worked as a trained researcher for this group, and she acted as a caretaker for Evelyn. Evelyn, codenamed E-001, escaped her containment on the tanker they were transporting her on, and she quickly infected everything with her mold. This is where I want to address a common complaint I hear from the community regarding this game. I hear a lot of people complaining that this does not feel like a Resident Evil game, and I ask you, how so? It has the survival aspects with limited resources and inventory space. It has horror elements as it is one of the scariest Resident Evil games. It has bioweapons in the form of Evelyn and her creatures. There is a secret organization behind all of this. And the game even sees the return of Umbrella as Blue Umbrella. We even get one of the series' veterans, Chris, not my Redfield, make an appearance.
I'm Redfield. I'm glad we found you.
So, enough of the story, because there is a lot to dissect here, and I could just keep talking on and on about it, but you should definitely experience the story for yourself if you have not yet. Now, let's talk about Ethan. A lot of people give criticism towards Ethan, saying that he is a bland personality, but I disagree. His character was intentionally supposed to be as simple as possible, as we were supposed to be him. His personality comes out in little remarks that mirror what we as the player are thinking at the time.
A fucking pocket knife?
It's a clever way to keep the immersion in the game. Speaking of immersion, something that I really appreciate was the way they told the story without using cutscenes. The only time cutscenes were used were at the very beginning, the end of the Mia flashback, and at the very end of the game. Anytime there is a character interaction, you can still move, which is a good design for a first-person horror game. Difficulty options has always been a thing in Resident Evil games, and 7 is no different. The game offers 3 choices, with an easy and normal being first available to you, and a Madhouse difficulty being unlocked after finishing the game once. Once again, paying homage to the original games, RE1, Director's Cut, and RE2, The game's Madhouse acts as an arranged mode similar to the games mentioned. Madhouse also increases difficulty along with the new item placements and enemy placements. The game also has adaptive difficulty, which is something that was implemented in RE4. Depending on the performance of the player, this system will affect the game in various ways, such as how much damage the enemies do, how much damage the player receives, how quickly the molded move, how quickly the molded attack. This is a good way to make every playthrough feel different, which is a good segue to our next topic, replayability. I tend to place a lot in a game's replayability, with good reason. The replayability of a game is what keeps players invested in the world and keeps them talking about it to others. And I have to say, Capcom nailed it with this one. With the 3 difficulties alone, they already made sure to bring the players back for 2 or more runs through this 3 to 9 hour trek. On top of this, there are unlockables to be obtained by beating the game and meeting certain time requirements. These extra items can make the game feel like a fun run, like you own the place once you obtain them. There is also DLC that adds to the overall story of the Bakers, with the DLC Daughters and the End of Zoe DLC, as well as the conclusion to Lucas Baker in the Not a Hero DLC with Chris, Not My Redfield.
I'm Redfield.
As I mentioned prior, the action gameplay was toned down from prior entries RE4 through RE6. The focus shifted back to horror. We now had an untrained civilian as our protagonist, as well as limited inventory and clunky gun controls. Limited inventory can be expanded with backpacks found throughout the game, and the gunplay can be improved by finding stabilizers. Health can be increased by finding steroids, but let's be honest, Ethan isn't going to reach the levels of Chris boulder punching Redfield anytime soon. Gunpowder makes its return, and you can combine it with chemical fluid to create ammo of different kinds. Gone are the red herbs, as the chemical fluids become the base for healing items as well. The game has a nice progression as you start out feeling way over your head to becoming a total badass who has had enough of the Baker shit by the end of the game. Audio design and music are some of the most important things in a game such as this. They are so important that if they fail at any one point, it can ruin the game. RE7 nails this though, with the exception of Mia's Wicked Witch of the West laugh. The audio design is stellar. This game was made to be played with a set of headphones that support surround sound. While the game is not on the levels of Dead Space, however, it still does a fantastic job of keeping you immersed in your surroundings. In the main house, you can hear Jack looking for you relative to your location. In the old house, you can hear the buzzing of the bugs and every footstep and every creak, which helps to keep you on your toes. The music is more of an ambience sound as opposed to traditional music, but this ambience nails it every time. During boss encounters, intense music does play, however, which adds to the intensity of the fight. While the music does fit well in the game, there isn't really anything memorable about the music except for the song that plays at the end. Go Tell Aunt Rhody by Jordan Rain is magnificent, and honestly, you should play the game for this one track. I'm obviously exaggerating, but I'm being serious at the same time. There is something fulfilling after you finish the game and hear this rendition of this beautiful song.
Tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody that everybody's dead.
Overall, this title in the Resident Evil series is one that should not be missed, as it brought back a lot of what had been missing for many years. While it still would have been nice to see some zombies, the callbacks to the originals and the Easter eggs are more than enough to make me smile and enjoy this love letter to Resident Evil horror. And now we've reached the end, and I appreciate all of you taking the time to watch this video. And I know this is a rather long one, but once you get me talking about something I'm passionate about, I can go on for a while. So I want to say thank you to all my supporters for backing the channel, and I will see you all again real soon. Oh, go tell Aunt Rhodey.
Call to him and he will come. She'll run to him like he's the one. His arms outstretched, but when she's done,